have it in here so you guys can have it when you need to have it down the road. Okay? So I'm really starting on slide number 10. So here's the anatomy of the GI tract, and we're going to go through every part of this. All right? I just want to point out a few things. One is, I'm going to say this like a trillion times. So we've got the mouth. What happens in the mouth? Many things happen in the mouth, but that's where we begin carb digestion. Okay? We've got this long thing called the esophagus, and I'm going to say this also a bunch of times. The minute we initiate the swallow, whatever the hell it is that we're swallowing, the minute we initiate that, we've lost all voluntary control, with the exception of gagging. Okay? And we'll just talk about that. Stuff goes into the stomach. This is, again, just the anatomy of the thing. The stomach, we're going to find out what's its main job. To process stuff? No. It's mainly a muscle. It does all kinds of other cool things I'm going to test you on, but its job is to make this stuff called chyme. Okay? I'm going to talk about it. Protein digestion begins in the stomach. Begins. Okay? It's not substantially done in the stomach. Then we have the stomach jets stuff out of the small intestine. The first part is the duodenum. And we're going to cover all the different parts of the small intestine. It's in the small intestine. So listen, where does carb digestion begin? The mouth. Where does protein digestion begin? The stomach. Where does fat digestion begin and end? Small intestine. And all digestion is completed in the small intestine, and all, or the majority of nutrient absorption happens in the small intestine. I'm going to say it a bunch of times, just relax, you're not writing this stuff down right now, okay? Carb digestion begins in the mouth, protein digestion begins in the stomach, and fat digestion begins and ends in the small intestine. All digestion ends in the small intestine. Most nutrient absorption happens in the small intestine. Okay? I'm having an out-of-body experience. I'm sorry. After small intestine, where do things go? The large intestine or colon. Okay? So what does the colon do? Listen, a bunch of things. It does mostly water absorption. But I'm going to say this. They might be yours, Abraham. I don't know. It's that.
Small intestine fat digestion begins and ends there.
That's okay. It's bad when technology talks back to you. Literally talks back to you. So we have, and just so I can say it once, we have ascending colon, right side of the body. Transverse colon, basically below the diaphragm across. Descending colon, left side of the body. Then we've got that thing called the sigmoid colon, and it dumps everything that's in it into the rectum, and then that's the storage facility until a person defecates. Make sense? Okay. So that's the lay of the land. There's a bunch of stuff up there. We're going to talk about them as they're important. So anatomy. Now notice, the slide, guys, listen. I've said it a million times. The slides are organized in about as anally retentive of a manner as possible. Okay? So, I talk about anatomy, then we talk about some physiology, and then we talk about pathology. Right? So, anatomy. So, what's in the mouth? Well, we've got teeth. I don't care how many teeth. It doesn't float my boat at all. Okay? And we've got salivary glands. So, it's the initial site of physical digestion. That's obvious. We have teeth for that, okay? And what's the point of our teeth? To break things down into a way that we can swallow what it is that we're eating. So we have 3 sets of salivary glands. The parotids are the big ones. They're on the side. When somebody gets mumps, where do they get mumps? Parotid glands, okay? They're ginormous. We have the sublingual gland. That's underneath the tongue, obviously sublingual. And then we have the submandibular, and that's below. Most of us can palpate, especially as you get older, because you lose that taut skin thing. No Botox. There's this weird thing called the Wharton's duct. So if you were to take a look in your mouth and you notice the gleek gland, right? The opening when people do gleeking, which is really gross, but whatever. You look at the base of your mouth and your tongue, the attachment to the base of the mouth, that little tendinous thing, it actually dead ends in the opening of the Wharton's duct. I've often tested on it, not because it's trivial pursuit, but it is a trivial pursuit. It's this important. If something happens and knocks out the sublingual, you still have the submandibular. So the Wharton's duct drains the submandibular, not the sublingual. Make sense? Okay. Aging process, yeah, y'all are gonna do that, okay? So decline in taste, there's a bunch of stuff, right? If you've been a chronic smoker, so I smoked from age 7 to 40, okay? When I quit smoking, I can taste things fabulously well now, but it took a few years to actually get my sense of taste back, right? As you get older, that goes to hell. As you get older, you don't salivate as much, okay? And what happens, that means that all the stuff that saliva can do, which we're going to talk about what it doesn't do it as effectively, all right? People lose teeth, you lose enamel. Jim, so should I go to the dentist and put fluoride treatments on my mouth? Don't your kids go twice a year like everybody else's kids to get fluoride treatments? My kids don't. My kids go to the dentist. Just want to throw that out there. But they don't get the fluoride treatments for a trillion reasons, and yeah, I'm a pain in the butt about absolutely everything in life. But we're born with the enamel we're going to have, and the only thing we can do is wear it down, period. Okay? So if you're somebody who brushes teeth rigorously, you are corroding or you're eroding your enamel at an accelerated rate, and that's going to affect you down the road for sure, okay? And then loss of gingival epithelial tissue. So I go to the dentist for my cleaning, and this event happened like a year and a half ago. I go more frequently than that, just want to volunteer that too. But so I went, and it was the first time this particular dentist, and he was like, Jim, you have receding gums. Are you a smoker? I was like, dude, at that time, I'm 55, bro. Okay? At 50, I don't know any 55-year-old who doesn't have a little bit of receding gum disease. That's what happens as you get older. The guy who was looking at my mouth was 31 years old, so, right? He didn't understand that. Saliva does 3 things. I mean, it does a hell of a lot of things, but it does 3 things for our purposes, okay? I said carbohydrate digestion begins in the mouth, right? So if you were to take a cracker, not one that's salty, just a regular old cracker with no salt, and you chew it, and chew it, and chew it, and chew it, and you don't swallow it, keep chewing it, eventually the damn thing tastes pretty sweet, okay? Why is that? Because what are crackers? They're just carbs, all right? So you mean it's terrible to eat those as snacks? Hell yeah. Simple sugar is terrible for you. Anyway, so saliva helps us begin the carb digestive process, all right? In order for us to be able to taste, and here's the deal, we take this for granted now, but it wasn't until about 4.5 years ago, maybe 5, that, I mean, we always thought that until something sweet hit your stomach, there was no trigger for insulin production and release from the pancreas. We now know that that's BS. So the minute your taste buds start firing that something is sweet, that automatically triggers insulin production and release. That's problematic, right? So you'll appreciate this, Heidi, from the stuff you've written. So what about Splenda or blue agave? Oh, they're so good and healthy for you. No, they're not. The minute it hits your tongue and there's sensory receptor transduction, your body automatically knows something sweet's going to come down. So it does the production. Oh, so what about gum? Right. Well, what about sugarless gum? Right, exactly. So you guys know that all that stuff just exists to make money. Okay, Jim, that's so unbelievably cynical. Buy it and chew it and see what happens. Okay? It's unhealthy. All right? And my kids are happy, guys. I just want to say that. All right? Chris?
So what's the problem with having insulin released into the body when you have no sugars to digest? Wouldn't it just break down your fats?
So when you get constant, so if we're constantly sticking, so you go to Starbucks, you get some French fries at, not you, Chris, but you get some French fries on the way home from McDonald's, that kind of thing. You're having carbs, right? The minute your tongue tastes insulin production, that leads to the last unit's diabetes. And I'm going to have a whole lot more to say about it, because the soapbox. Bottom line is, cancer from a conceptual and intellectual perspective is super sexy. Cardiovascular disease processes and neurological stuff, that's my bailiwick. Neurological stuff, that's super sexy stuff. Diabetes isn't sexy, but probably 40-45% of all the patients you're going to see are either diabetic or on their way to become diabetic. And that simple little triggering, you constantly are firing to your pancreas, make. Eventually, that's how you become a type 2 diabetic. Okay? So that's why it's important. I am warm, sorry. So, in order to do taste, we have to be able to set things free, chemistry principle, right? So we need the fluid to get whatever it is that's in the food that we're eating or chewing on to be able to solvate it, right? Dissolve it and get it to go into the various taste buds that we have and send triggers. Oh, that's what this tastes like. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And then the other thing is, excuse me, the stomach's job is to prepare this thing called chyme. And I'm not being gross when I say this, but it's like an Alfredo sauce, okay? The saliva and chewing food, our job is to create this thing called a bolus. So if it's a cube, it's 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. If it's a sphere, it's 1 inch in diameter. Now I know everybody has that in mind when they eat, right? But that's the optimal size to not have any problems with your esophagus. Does that make sense to everybody? So, I don't really particularly care about the pharynx. Everybody knows what the pharynx is. It transports the food from the mouth, conduit from the mouth to the esophagus, okay? And we've got this, in the pharynx, we've got this thing called the epiglottis. We talked about it. And what does that do? That shuts on the trachea to prevent aspiration of any food or fluid. So I don't care about these divisions, okay? I mean, they're very important divisions out in the clinical world if you're working for an ENT or an emergency room, but I don't care about this. So swallowing. The soft palate in the roof of the mouth, in the posterior part of the roof of the mouth, actually hinges up when we initiate swallowing. And why is that? So that it can shut access to the nasopharynx. Does that make sense to you guys? So it does a really great job. And the uvula is also supposed to help with that, right? The speed boxing bag, So I'm sure it's never happened to you guys, but if you're drinking some carbonated beverage, whatever that might be, rapidly, and all of a sudden it comes out of your nose. Okay, right, so the seal isn't that good, right? That's the way I felt watching my Patriots play last week. They won in a high school kind of way, but whatever. Anyway, so everything is pulled off by our brain the minute we initiate the swallow reflex, okay? It's really incredible, but if we had to consciously think, you know, there are some people who have psychogenic dysphagia, they have this, I can't swallow. But there's nothing structurally wrong, and there's nothing necessarily neurologically wrong. It's, they had a bad experience, and sometimes it takes years to actually find out what the hell a bad experience was. They had a bad experience was they gagged on something and thought they were suffocating, and they see something they can't swallow. Well, none of us make ourselves swallow. Jim, well, what about the horse pills? You know, like Augmentin, for example. That's like literally like a horse pill. How you have to actually like work your mouth and your tongue into sort of like knife. It's completely up here. Okay, for real, it's up there. And we're going to actually take a look at dysphagia at some point, hopefully tonight. So we've got an esophagus. It's super long. It connects the oropharynx, the bottom part of the throat, okay, from the oral cavity all the way down to the stomach. So that means what? It traverses through the thorax and it enters the abdomen. Make sense? And it's because it does that, and because it does that through, so listen, our diaphragm, just got to taking a test about the respiratory system. Our diaphragm has a hole for the aorta, the aortic foramen. It's got a hole for the inferior vena cava, the vena cava foramen. It has a hiatus for the damn esophagus. What does that mean? There is this puckering of muscle tissue and fibers that go a certain way. There isn't some tendinous sheath around it like there is for the aorta and the inferior vena cava. It's just basically a natural opening, which happens embryologically for the esophagus to go through. That opening tends to get structurally weak in many circumstances, which we'll talk about, and that's how a person can get hiatal hernia. Does that make sense to you guys? I'm going to talk about hiatal hernia, all right? It's super important because by the time you guys hit 50, there will be a 75 to 80% chance that you will have a hiatal hernia unless you take care of yourself now, okay? So why is the esophagus stratified squamous epithelial tissue? Here's the answer. So we can eat chips, okay? I have frequently actually had that as an answer choice because that actually says it well. If you want chips and salsa, you don't want to tear everything all the way down, right? And you don't want to chew enough that you're essentially creating cornmeal, right? So how do we deal with that stratified squamous epithelial tissue? When, and we're going to talk about it, when a person gets porosis, heartburn, or if you have a history of eating spicy stuff, salty stuff, carbonated beverages, and the list is endless, okay? Alcohol. First time anybody has alcohol, ever, the very first time, it burns. Period. Burns. Okay? And it's not that it doesn't burn. We don't listen. I love all the fairy tales, okay? I was actually with a group of physicians today, had a meeting, I was doing a presentation with them, and it was so refreshing. One of the guys that was in the group, he said, Jim, don't you just love all the bullshit fairy tales that people subscribe to looking at stuff on the web? And I'm just like, that's a man after my own heart. Okay. So it doesn't stop burning. You don't ever train your tissue to be able to deal with it. Your brain, brilliant and stupid simultaneously, says, hey, no point in paying attention to the burn feeling because you're going to keep on doing it. You've been doing it habitually anyway, so it knocks it out. So yeah, you have a little extra, it might burn a little bit or whatever. It doesn't mean it's, and listen, when it's burning, what is it doing? And we're gonna talk at great length about it. It's harming the stratified squamous epithelial tissue. So a glass of wine a night's okay, right, Jim? We'll talk about many fairy tales in this unit. The minute we swallow, listen, the minute we initiate the swallow reflex, except for throwing up, everything gets conveyor belted from the top of the esophagus, the most superior portion of the esophagus, all the way to our anus by peristalsis, okay? And that's all governed by smooth muscle. Lower esophageal sphincter. So, here. So, I just want to point this out. I'm going to go back to that slide. So here's the lower esophageal sphincter. I want you to listen to what I'm going to say to you. The lower esophageal sphincter is not a true sphincter. Okay? So Jim, you're pretty animated about this. Hell yes I am. That's why people get GERD. That's why people have ulcerative activity. That's why people get Barrett's esophagus. That's why people can get cancer of the esophagus. Okay? Why? Because it's not a true sphincter. What does it mean to be a true sphincter? Hormones and or nerves and neurotransmitters make the tissue open. That's not what happens here. All that happens here on either side of the door, if there's a knock on either side, just pressure or chemical irritation, poof, it opens up. So as easy as things come in, they can go right back out again. Does that make sense to you guys? It has to be that way because we wouldn't be able to throw up, right? The problem is that the expense that we pay is when we overstuff our stomachs or put certain things in our stomach or are wearing, tight-fitting clothing, or you're pregnant, all that stuff exerts what? Upward pressure. And if you get upward pressure, they may not come all the way out, but they'll splash and get the corrosive hydrochloric acid from the stomach in the distal third of the esophagus, and you're on your way to lifelong problems. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so let's go back here.
So you're saying a true sphincter is opened by
Hormones or neurotransmitters, okay? So the stomach. So what the hell does the stomach do? A trillion things, so we're gonna come back and look at it in great detail, okay? But its job is to crush and beat the hell out of the contents and make it the thick Alfredo sauce stuff called chyme, okay? Why? Because that's the stuff that can get jetted out into the small intestine and have the enzymes in the small intestine do their job. Make sense to you guys? Okay. So we release hydrochloric acid, a bunch of other stuff. Why do we release hydrochloric acid? To cleave pepsinogen into pepsin. Well, that's certainly one reason. Wait, there's more than one reason? Hell yeah. Look, let's say this is a brand new Powerade bottle. Open it up, and just swallowed millions upon millions of microbes that are floating in here. There's probably 1 trillion microbes floating in the air here and on everything, on the fomites, okay? I'm not being neurotic about that. It's reality. So we have to be able to kill that stuff before it gets into our body. If it's in your stomach, it's in your body. It's a tube. The stomach's a tube. Nothing actually enters your body until the small intestine, okay? So I love this one. Its capacity is about a liter and a half. We all know that others, not us, have tested the stretchiness of that, okay? So let's look at the picture. Lower esophageal sphincter, not a true one. There's the fundus, here's the body. I don't care much about that. Pyloric sphincter, that's the exit from the stomach. That's a true sphincter. Every other sphincter we're going to talk about is a true sphincter, okay? So the only exception is the LES, lower esophageal sphincter. This doesn't open on, so pressure, right? What's the job of the stomach? To make chyme, and it moves stuff to press up against here, and then there has to be a neural message that says, open up, and it opens up, okay? And then it closes. That seals very effectively well. We look at these weird bumps in here. Those are called sort of small mountain ranges and then the valleys in between. Those are rugae, and that's where we get stretchiness, okay? And then what do you notice? The muscle layers. There are 3, and they're all going in different directions. Why are they going in different directions? They serve different functions. The longitudinal is always the outermost, and that's actually true throughout the entire GI tract. It's the longitudinal muscles that do peristalsis, okay? The circular ones, it's like sticking things, and I'm not making a sexist statement. I happen to love Daniel Craig's Bond. I like very much his portrayal of Bond. And those movies are actually very thoughtfully done, and they're philosophical. Oh, okay. So he has his martinis shaken, not stirred. So a shaker at a bar, not that any of you would ever know what that is, but so you go like this, right? Well, how do we pull that off physiologically? Pinch one end, sends the stuff to the other end, close off, sends it back. Does that make sense? That is what the circular layer does. And then we have the oblique layer, and what is that there for? To basically beat the hell out of what's inside the stomach. To puree it and make it Alfredo sauce-like. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So there are a bunch of cells in the stomach, okay? We've got chief cells. They make pepsinogen. Anything in human biology, and actually in all biology, anything that's OGEN at the end means that's the inactive form, okay? So chief cells secrete pepsinogen, and that becomes pepsin, which helps break longer peptide chains into smaller ones. Well, those mean proteins, right? I'm going to talk about the whole digestive process in a few minutes about enzymes. We have parietal cells, and what do? Well, they produce the hydrochloric acid that nukes microbes and that helps to cleave the inactive group off of pepsinogen to make it pepsin, okay? But it also releases what? Intrinsic factor. Now listen, if the only thing that's wrong with a patient's body is they don't make enough or they don't make any intrinsic factor, that means that they cannot absorb vitamin B12, no matter how much they eat, okay? And I can tell you, and we'll get to what some of that stuff means and does, but that's extremely bad, okay? Where do we absorb vitamin B12? Listen, large intestine, not the small intestine, okay? You guys have to know that. Yeah, Michael?
So are B12
Unless you have a deficiency, there's no need to have a B12 shot. And that's a good question, dude. So every study that's ever been done for decades, and that's a big statement. Yes, so listen. Every flipping study that's ever been done on supplements, minerals, vitamins, etc., unless you have a diagnosed deficiency, laboratory confirmed, physician certified, you do not take supplements. They change the body biochemistry. They define new homeostatic points. And we know that taking supplements, instead of just eating well-balanced meals, if you take supplements, or you take supplements to enhance what you're eating, it's actually in the long term super dangerous. It causes people to get very unhealthy. Sometimes plain caloric supplements are dangerously unhealthy. So you mean to tell me that a pregnant mom's not supposed to take a multivitamin? What about what I just got through saying, did you not hear? I didn't say multivitamins, I said supplements. Well, are multivitamins any good? As the famous atheist Christopher Hitchens used to famously say, you may believe that if you wish. Okay? Bottom line is that multivitamins aren't bad. We pee about 65% of it out. So if it costs you $15 to buy the bottle, yeah, you do math. You got like $4 worth. Okay? If we have 4 fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Hey, I take like 4 trillion units of vitamin A to help my vision. Does it help my vision? No, you're setting yourself up for cancer. Wait, it's a vitamin, Jim. It's fat-soluble. We don't excrete the excess. It's the same thing as taking the drug. Okay? Vitamin D, obviously we know we can't absorb any calcium unless we have vitamin D. How much vitamin D does a healthy person's body need? 15 minutes out during the daytime in New Mexico, roughly a day. Notice it didn't say supplement. Right, exactly. Okay? Vitamin E, ooh, that makes my skin so sexy and velvety. Yeah, okay, whatever. Bottom line is, that's super dangerous if you take more. All these 4, by the way, that's not potassium, right? Okay. Boy, that's all I'm saying. Vitamin K, 2 charge nurses now at a hospital along Central, basically bee-slapping one of their nurses and saying, when you do the presentation, no, vitamin K is potassium. Everybody knows that.
Oh,
Don't
Lord.
touch my patients, okay? But bottom line is, these are all fat soluble. If you take more than 100%, then there's more than 100% multivitamin, or there's 100% multivitamin, and then you eat from different sources, they're dangerous for you. Okay? Period. They're dangerous. Also, notice what stimulates the parietal cells to release hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. Acetylcholine, all right, that's not all that exciting. Well, it is. We'll talk about it in a little while. But histamine, wait. Yes, it's true. Very many, a statistically significant percentage, whatever the number is, of asthmatics also have acid reflux. In fact, a lot of times the acid reflux that they have lands up causing further asthmatic problems for them. Why? Because whatever the hell the triggers are that cause you to release histamine, that bring about all the stuff we talked about in the unit you just took a test on, actually stimulates your stomach also. Okay? And that's important to know. So, Jim, should I take Benadryl, 4 times a day so that my stomach doesn't get acidic? No. Right? Okay. Mucus cells. Why do we have mucus cells? What the hell do? They have bicarb, right? And also just some plain old mucus. And what do? They shelter the lining of the stomach so that the acidic and the hydrochloric acid does not corrode it. Does that make sense to you guys? Now listen. Pause for a second. Return to those days of AMP1 and AMP2. Oh, those lovely days. The tests were better, right? Okay. Especially those who had me for summertime for AMP2 lecture. The tests were super easy compared to tonight's exam, right?
Oh yeah, they were great. Loved them.
Thanks, Mariah.
All of them.
Thanks. Great student. Thank you. I appreciate that shout out. Bernice, don't you care? Okay. Now they were better. So anyway, whatever. They're involved in other things right now. So listen. What's the other protective mechanism that we have in the stomach that's super dangerous if you're constantly triggering it? We replace the epithelial lining of the stomach roughly every 3 to 5 days. Okay? So we're constantly reproducing the cells. Why? Because the mucus and the bicarb that we make do not adequately protect the lining, so we slough it off. Problem? That means we have a hypermitotic state for every single minute that we have a heartbeat. We have a hypermitotic state. You put stuff in there that causes chronic inflammation, like what? Oh, I don't know, alcohol. Right. Habanero sauce, ghost pepper, right? Hot beverages. Jim, do you enjoy life? Yeah, totally I do. Okay? If you're somebody who likes to have your coffee piping hot, yeah, you're causing chronic inflammation in your stomach lining. Just saying, okay? Then we've got these things called G cells. This is an example of one of only three that we talked about in other classes. Only 3 positive feedback mechanisms in the human body that are healthy. That's one of them. So, something comes in the stomach says, hey, I gotta take care of whatever's in me. The G cells release gastrin. Gastrin gets into the blood, comes back, and it causes what? It causes the stomach to do its job faster. And that stimulation does what? Causes the release of more gastrin. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So there is the stained glass window picture of, notice, what is the first cell that's closest to the surface? Mucus, right? So mucus gets laid down first before all the other cells release their stuff. Make sense? Okay. So by the way, if you want to listen, if you have hiatal hernia, you have to eat more frequent meals and less at each meal. Okay? So that's a medical situation that you have to pay attention to. So I'm not talking to that population base. You hear me? If you don't have hiatal hernia, but you're, I don't know, you believe the words of somebody who's a trainer. I'm not saying trainers are bad, but we all can study for a few days and take the training exam. You don't have to have biochemistry and pathophys, etc. I'm not putting them down, but they really say, I don't know why the hell people in school, what do you think they should eat? Where's their knowledge coming from? The web and their buddies, okay? So, the bottom line is, well, you got a protein load, dude. You want to get big, you got a protein load. You got to eat every 2 hours. I'm not talking to you if you have hiatal hernia. You have no choice. If you eat every 2 hours, what are you doing? You're constantly getting acid release in your stomach. If you don't eat exactly at the same time every day, and that's what you're doing, then your stomach releases, it gets habituated, and it begins to release the acid anyway. You wear your lining down. Does that make sense, everybody? Right.
What about people who fast? How does that?
I'm not going to talk about that. It's a problem topic. Crystal?
So, like, what about people who, like, the medical who actually, like, work nights and then try to go back to normal schedule during the days? Does that, I mean, are they just, like, screwing up their stomachs as well?
So, if you've worked nights for 2 years, not even consecutively, you've probably shortened your lifespan by 5. That's all I'm willing to say. Our body can get retrained, right, Crystal? You start eating right, start eating at the right time, you're no longer working the graveyard shift, and we've all done it. Your body responds favorably. For those who've worked the graveyard shift for a long time and eat, and here's the deal, guys, I'm not saying don't work the graveyard shift, so don't email me nasty crap, okay? But our bodies aren't meant, we're really not meant to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning. We're not meant to be awake from 11 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. We've all done it. I did that for a period of years, okay? Because that's when all the crazy shit happens in the emergency room, right? Okay? Especially on the weekends. But our body's just not made to do that. So, in cultures where you can factor out, where you can equalize nutritional intake and all the other stuff. So you have 2 people from different cultures, but 2 people who are relatively the same health and they age and they're eating relatively the same things. If one of those people is working at night, no matter what quality access to healthcare they have, that person's going to be sicker and die younger. Okay? So, small intestine is 3 parts. I want you to know that the first part's short. You don't need to know how long. is the duodenum. The part where we do the lion's share of our digestion and absorption is the jejunum. That's the next part. And then roughly 40 to 50% of the small intestine is the last part called the ileum. And that kind of does the fine-tuning stuff, okay? The small intestine dead ends into the cecum, the first part of the ascending colon. And the small intestine, where it dead ends into the cecum, there is a true sphincter called the ileocecal sphincter, okay? It's a true sphincter when there's chemical irritation or just physical pressure against it that triggers neurotransmitter release. It opens up. Out goes the stuff, the waste from the small intestine and the ileum, and it drops down into the cecum. And that act of dropping down or stretching or chemical irritation in the cecum is a feedback mechanism that tells the ileocecal sphincter to close. Make sense? Okay. So, we've got intestinal villi, and then separately we've got microvilli. The intestinal villi are the bigger villi, and so here's the deal. If you were to take a look, and I've got slides in the next chapter, I think, we start talking about pathology. But if you take a look, it's literally, you take a scope, an endoscope, and you actually go through the stomach and get into the duodenum, and you snake the scope down in the small intestine. What you see is a spiral staircase going down. When you look at it even closer, there's a spiral staircase going down, and then there's all these bazillions of intestinal villi. What do? Dramatically increase the surface area for absorption. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? All right. It's on those villi that we have the microvilli that have the brush border and have the enzymes. Okay? And so this picture depicts that. And so now's as good a time as any in following stuff. We have 3 different tiers of enzymes working, okay? So the first tier of enzymes break down big stuff. Well, like what? Salivary amylase, breaking carbs down into smaller manageable units, okay? Pepsin, the activated form of pepsinogen, breaking down proteins a bit into some peptides, okay? So we get into the next tier happens at the level of the duodenum. So this is above the duodenum. At the level of the duodenum, what do we have? We have breakdown into manageable small units. So, for example, if we're talking about protein, the breakdown of protein into manageable small units, well, we have smaller peptides, okay? So instead of having a 300 amino acid peptide, we might have 4 or 5 70, 60, 50 unit peptides. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And then at the brush border, that's where all the money's at. So I'm going to put $sign. That's where all the money's at. What do you mean by that? That's where we break down stuff into individual or dimeric. Dimeric, what the hell does that mean? 2 molecules put together. Okay? So break down stuff into individual or dimeric molecules. So, hey, you want to get glycine or alanine or isoleucine to come out of your small intestine and go into the circulation, what do you have to do? Well, the brush border enzymes are going to be the ones that set the isoleucine free so that you can absorb it. Does that make sense to you guys? So there's all these people that are taking biologic peptides, okay? So dude, you gotta take the branching peptides because they help build up muscle quicker. I will grant you that they do in fact build up muscle quicker and you can bulk up quicker. You're shortchanging, are they unhealthy? Do whatever the hell floats your boat, okay? What do they do? They're bypassing levels 1 and 2. What happens when you take a vitamin? You're bypassing levels 1 and 2. Guys, listen to me. Our body wants to work and expend as much flipping ATP as possible to rip molecules apart. When you bypass that, so are there people who can do supplements and exercise like mad and gain weight? Yes, absolutely. You're not blowing a bunch of ATP because you're taking it almost in absorptive fashion when you swallow it. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. We've got these weird things called the crypts of Lieberkühn and in the small intestine. And what do they do? What do we need a whole lot of to get the enzymes to work? First of all, to be able to bump across the molecules that they can do their work on and then to do their work. What do we need? A whole lot of fluid. Where does most of the fluid come from? Crypts of Lieberkühn. Okay, I can't do that again. Okay? So what does it do? We release almost 2 liters a day. And if you're eating a bunch of times, it's more than that. Okay? Of fluid a day. By the way, love to test on the following. Where do we do most of our absorption of water? Small intestine, not the large intestine. Even though the colon's main job is to absorb water. Okay? And in the small intestine, we also have goblet cells and Brunner's glands. And what do? They provide mucus and mix together with the bicarb that the pancreas releases. So we could neutralize the acidic chyme coming out of the stomach. Make sense? Okay. I don't care about that. Large intestine, it does water absorption. It absorbs some of the B complex vitamins, including B12, and that's where the appendix is. Okay, is the appendix always attached to the cecum in the inferior position? I can tell you the very first surgery that I was a part of, we knew it was appendicitis, and couldn't find the appendix. Took a little while to find the appendix, and it was actually on the left side of that particular patient's body. Just insane. Okay. I already talked to you guys about this. So, a couple very important takeaways here. These individual units are called haustra, and stool is moving through the large intestine. It parks temporarily in each of the haustra, and it spends anywhere from a few minutes to maybe as much as 10 to 15 minutes. And what's the point of that? To absorb out the right amount of water so that we don't get dehydrated. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. The other thing I want to point out is, look, we've got here superior mesenteric artery and then inferior mesenteric artery. It is the inferior mesenteric artery from AP2 that supplies the majority of the oxygenated blood to the large intestine. It is the superior mesenteric artery that largely supplies the small intestine. If you're working with senior citizens, they can present with bowel obstruction, and they in fact may have a practical bowel obstruction, but you have to be super sensitive to, is it a lesion of the inferior mesenteric artery? Did it get pinched? Is there a tumor? Is there a mass? Was there did they fall and accidentally hit something so that that vessel ruptured or got pinched, and then the colon became ischemic. Does that make sense to you guys? All right. So I love pictures. Let's look at pictures. Everything that was on the slides that just went past is on these pictures, actually and more. So, outermost layer, mesentery. So we learned about that in A&P2. For those of you who have A&P2, you will learn about that, okay? The mesentery holds all of the small intestine, and the large intestine kind of gives shape to them, tethers them, and there are nerves and blood vessels that run through them. That's why colon screenings are super important. Colon cancer screenings are super important because if you get a tumor that perforates through and comes out and touches the mesentery, you get metastasis, just goes crazy, okay? Does that make sense to you guys? All right, so outermost layer of muscle, what is it? Longitudinal, that's where we do peristalsis. Innermost layer, circular, that's where we do the propulsion and the mixing, etc., okay? What's in between the two layers of muscle there? The myenteric plexus. So listen, right? We have skeletal muscle, we have smooth muscle, we have cardiac muscle. Cool, we know all about that. This is all smooth muscle, right? We also have nervous systems. We have the central nervous system and we have the peripheral nervous system. What's in the peripheral nervous system? Well, the autonomic, right? We've got parasympathetic and sympathetic, but we also separately have the enteric nervous system. So, and I don't know if it's in any of the slides, but you should know it. enteric, okay? The thing that's weird is that even though the brain has override control of everything neuronally in the body, including the GI tract, even though that's the case, almost everything is pulled off locally in the GI tract. The myenteric plexus is the local part of the enteric nervous system that pulls off peristalsis, bless you, it pulls off peristalsis and the mixing and grinding stuff. Make sense to you guys? Okay. Underneath the circular layer, we have what? Submucosa. You notice there's all kinds of highways here in the submucosa. There are blood vessels and there are nerves. Lo and behold, what's the name of this regional network? The submucosal plexus. Myenteric plexus innervates the muscles, gets them to do peristalsis and the mixing and mashing. The submucosal plexus controls all secretions. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? All right. We go down further, we've got this itsy bitsy tiny layer of muscle. Here's the lumen of the small intestine or stomach or large intestine. This is just a representative example. Okay? So here's the lumen. What's this? That's called the muscularis mucosa. I want you to know that. Listen, what happens, Jim, if some food's not perfectly digested and it gets stuck on a villus? Well, that's an important question, right? So how do we get it off? We have twitches, constant twitches that shakes the stuff free. Does that make sense to you guys? Well, where do those twitchings happen? Muscularis mucosa. All right? So, this is stuff we just went through. Sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. Oh, so it's the PNS in a normal, healthy situation, right? You go home, you're a Raiders fan, you can't digest anything right now. You know what the hell's going on in the game. Or you do, and you don't want Jim to know, which is fine, okay? But you go home and you chill, you have a little food or whatever, you chill. You're so moved by your PATHO 2 lecture that you Google all kinds of quality scientific articles from PubMed or NIH or whatever, okay? And you're just chilling out, So what's going on? Your enteric system locally is doing the work, and it's being superintended by the parasympathetic nervous system. Make sense to you guys? All right. You get a text that's really weird. Oh my God, your partner is stranded on I-25, which is at night like taking your life in your own hands, right? Just because of the way people drive. I hate the way people drive in this state. Oh my God. Anyway, so you're like, shit. Oh, wait a second. He or she has a car. I gotta get somebody else's car. Boom, you get up, your heart's pumping, you're breathing a little faster, sympathetic nervous system. In a battle between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, sympathetic wins every time. So what does that mean? If you're a super stressed person, you don't do digestion particularly effectively. Okay? Just saying. What about, so listen, so if you're a meth person and you get tweaked on meth, well, guess what? You can completely shut down your GI tract. You get so freaked out when something that happens that everything stops. Parasympathetic nervous system goes to hell for a while because SNS always has override. Okay? I don't care about that. Don't care about that. Don't care about this. Is absolutely overkill. Hey, how many spikes are there for you? I don't care about that. Hormonal control, supremely important. Now, I want to point out a few things here. Students tend to get the hormones screwed up. So the first one's gastrin. We already talked about that. What releases that? The stomach does. Okay? Where does it get released? G cells. G for gastrin. Okay? Cholecystokinin. Now listen. What does that do? It encourages the release of bile from the gallbladder. Okay? So pause for a second. If it encourages the release of bile from the gallbladder, where does it get released? It gets released from the jejunum. Okay? Listen to me. Write it down. I'm going to test you on this stuff. Cholecystokinin does not get made in the stomach. I don't know what it is about that particular hormone. Most people think it gets made in the stomach. It doesn't. Okay? Small intestine, and it causes the gallbladder to contract and release bile. Bile, guys, listen to me, huge pet peeve of mine. I will test you, I promise. Okay? Bile does not flipping digest anything. All that it does is emulsify fats. Okay? Bile doesn't digest anything, it emulsifies fats. So cholecystokinin, so the jejunum says, hey, there's fat in the lumen. I need bile to be able to emulsify the fat. Make sense? It does not get released by the stomach. Gastric inhibitory peptide. So let's just talk straight shot for a second, okay? So you go to some amazing, let's say, Korean or Thai restaurant. I love Korean or Thai food, okay? And you eat a massive amount of vegetables, and you're like, oh man, I'm really full. But like an hour later, you don't feel bloated, right? Okay. You go to Dion's. Don't hurt me, Jim. Yeah, you go to Dion's, and you eat some pizza there. And there's cheese, well, that's saturated fats. You got pepperoni, some sausage, that's a whole lot of fat grams there. And you pour over a liquid cholesterol, ranch dressing, okay? Right? Everybody's saying, yes, Jim, we do that. Let's do it as a class field trip. No, okay? And what happens? You don't even have to eat as much as you ate at the Thai or the Korean restaurant, and you get full and you get bloated, and it takes a long time. for that bloated feeling to go away. So what do? I'll have a beer! Not at Dion's. Or I'll just drink, a third pitcher of Diet Dr. Pepper, or whatever. And the bloating still stays. Why? Guys, this should be, seriously, okay? Every single person on this planet is born lactose intolerant. 85% of the population of the world remains lactose intolerant until the day they die. Cows' milk is for cows, right? Okay. Well, I want you to think about this. The more fat you have, good or bad fat you have in your stomach, the slower the stomach's going to allow that fat to be released in the small intestine. Why? We can't handle too much fat. It takes a long time to deal with the fat. But this diet said, I'm talking real science, okay? I don't care what any diet said. It's true. You can eat meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and avoid all carbs and just have proteins and fat, and you will drop weight. There's no doubt about it. You will. Absolutely you will. And you'll do it quickly too, okay? And you're clogging your arteries, and you're retraining your GI tract, okay? So every single time we have red meat, every single time we have fats, even the healthy kind, you ate an avocado, God bless, I'm talking to you, okay? You use olive oil. I use olive oil. I'm from the Mediterranean regions. Yes, I use olive oil. How much? Tablespoon for what? A whole meal. But what? So, bottom line is, every time you eat red meat, every time, there's a list of things. Every time you eat red meat, every time you eat nitrogenous containing things like lunch meats or deli meats, every time you eat fat of any kind, you have a mild inflammatory response in your small intestine. If you listen, even Dr. Oz is saying, and I hate him, and I don't listen to him, okay? But somebody sent me something that Oz said recently, and I was like, damn, he's not actually trying to sell his supplements or his creams or whatever, so sweet, I read it, okay? And what did he say? Every time you get inflammation, you're one step closer potentially to the carcinogenic process. So you're eating lots of fat? Well, I'm eating the daily maximum requirement. I'm under the daily maximum requirement. Okay, right? So I'm not saying go vegan. Vegan's actually pretty unhealthy, unless you know what to do, okay? And most people who are vegan don't know what to do, and they end up in the hospital at some point, okay? Unless they're raised that way, and they learn all the right things. The bottom line is we have gastric inhibitory peptide. There's a challenge at a lot of colleges that have Greek houses, right? Fraternities and sororities. If you can drink more than 2 gallons of milk without puking, of whole milk, without puking, you get to be in our fraternity or sorority. Tell me what scream solves, okay? No human being is able to do that. Why? Because, first of all, what's whole milk? It's colloid suspension of the most unhealthy fat that there is in the world. All right? It's horrible. It's not good for you. Well, you're supposed to drink it to get big, strong bones and muscles. The last time I checked, in India, there are a whole lot of pretty strong people who don't have any of that. Okay? Just saying. So, why can you not digest that 2 gallons of whole milk? That's the most fat that shuts the stomach down. Gastric inhibitory peptides being released so prolifically that none of the fat in the stomach gets jetted into the small intestine. The only way that whole milk is coming out is from your mouth. Does that make sense to you guys? So listen, if we have that as a built-in flipping mechanism, shouldn't that be a tip-off about how we're supposed to relate to these food substances? You betcha, okay? By the way, let me let you in on a little secret. The only organ that gives us the enzymes that digest fat is the pancreas. That's it. You harm your pancreas, you're harming your ability to digest fat. You having greater inflammatory responses in your GI tract. Okay? I don't care about this. I don't care about that. Sorry. Talk about this. So chewing. The first step, okay? And we know what chewing is about. We break things down, physical digestion. We have salivary amylase in the mouth that is released with the saliva. Listen, pancreatic amylase that digests carbs, that's exactly the same enzyme as we have in salivary amylase. Okay? It's just amylase. I don't care about the 4 stages of swallowing. I do want you to know, though, what nerve is involved in pulling off the amazing symphony of swallowing. And that's the trigeminal nerve. And the swallowing center is parked there for where? In the medulla oblongata. Okay? Makes sense? What is puking? What was that? Absolutely. The swallow centers in the medulla oblongata and the cranial nerve, trigeminal or cranial nerve number 5, but we call it the trigeminal for our class. The trigeminal nerve is what pulls off all the symphony of all the involuntary actions involved in swallowing. Make sense? So what's puking? Reverse swallowing. That's it. Okay? So, cool. Motor function, so I told you guys we need to make chyme, and I told you that the chyme gets pushed towards the pyloric sphincter, and when it gets to that region, there are neuronal triggers that cause the pyloric sphincter to open up and jet the right amount of chyme into the small intestine, okay? So, what things control how much chyme gets jetted out of our stomach into the small intestine? Well, we know fat does. The higher the fat content, but I don't eat any bad fats. Fat, damn it, any kind of fat, okay? So, fat, the amount of fats, is there a high acidic content in your stomach, okay? So if you're eating really spicy foods, high acid content, okay? And so the higher the acid content, the slower you're going to get stuff released into the small intestine. Why? We have to give the pancreas time to release enough bicarb, and we have to give the goblet cells and the Bruder cells enough time to release enough mucus so that we can protect the duodenal lining from the acid, and we can neutralize the acid when it comes out. So, when you drink alcohol, when you drink pop or soda, whatever we call it out here, when you drink caffeine, those are all acidic. So it lingers in your stomach, doing all kinds of wonderful things to our stomach lining. Okay? Makes sense to you guys? And then what's the other thing? The hypertonicity. So if you have something that's super hypertonic, which means what? Like there's a high osmotic or oncotic or colloid gradient. So you're protein loading, or you're putting biological, branched amino acids, BBAAs, that all kinds of muscle people use. You're putting them in, you're doing pre-workout, or post-workout, or mid-workout, or whatever, okay? You're putting all that crap in your body. What are you doing? Well, the more broken down it is when you first take it in, that's the whole point, isn't it? For ready absorption for those big, fast muscles. The more of that stuff you put in, the greater the hypertonicity. The more salt you have, the greater the hypertonicity. Which means what? It means it keeps the fluids in the lumen of the small intestine and it impairs effective absorption. Okay? Another thing and so what happens when you have a very hypertonic solution in the lumen of your small intestine? You're on your way to diarrhea. Okay? Make sense? How long for passage? You know what, guys? You don't need to know this. Okay? That's creepy. This kind of puts together some of the stuff that we've talked about. I want to say this. So the real reason why I have this slide here is there are several reasons. So the liver is, like the hypothalamus, the liver is a master organ for our body. It's the liver that makes the decision about nutrients, It's the liver that makes a decision about carbs and proteins and fats. It's the liver that makes a decision about cholesterol. It's the liver that decides what's going to happen to all the stuff that we're digesting and where it's going to go. The deal with sugars and amino acids, they get absorbed directly out of the lumen of the small intestine and they go directly into the capillary beds in the villi. Make sense? Yes? Okay. So I'm going to say that again. Carbs, they get broken down, and amino acids, they get absorbed where? In the vasculature in the villi. Fats don't. By the way, for every single glucose molecule that you want to come out of the lumen in your small intestine to get absorbed, you have to have one sodium ion co-transporting that glucose in, just the way it happens at the cellular level. Okay? What happens to fats? Well, we emulsify them, and it's that emulsified fat that can go into the lacteal system. Lacteal system. Female mammary tissue has lacteal system. Right, good instinct. What's lacteal stuff? It's basically lymph transport. What happens to the fat is it gets ferried as a micelle. We'll talk about that. It gets ferried to the liver. The liver decides, do I keep it? Do I store it? Do I break it down? Do I ship it out? Does that make sense to you guys? So you mess with your liver, you're harming your body in the worst possible way. What's the most effective way to mess with your liver? Well, drinking any kind of alcohol, of course. Eating the wrong foods, being obese, putting a lot of fat in it. Here he goes again. Okay? Well, we're in the digestive unit, so there are. Don't care about this. So remember, circular muscles, what do they do? That's this slide. Okay? I already talked to you about the ileocecal sphincter. And there we go. And listen, where does it open up? What have you noticed? It drops stuff down because that's what triggers the feedback to shut the sphincter. The one thing we don't want happening is to have backsplash from the colon coming into the small intestine. That would be potentially disastrously bad. Okay?
How does that happen?
It doesn't happen unless you have, like if you have cancer, if you had bowel obstruction, if you had to have, if you were in a terrible accident, you had trauma. Does that make sense? Okay. So large intestine. So listen. How many mass movements a day is a person supposed to have? No two human beings are the same. I do want to tell you that The Rock eats so much food that he goes to the bathroom like 9-10 times a day. And we're not made for that, guys. Okay? It's super unhealthy. But like the famous and now deceased 42-year-old Rich Piana, who did lots of ways, and ways killed him. He actually, I think he had, I don't know if he had a heart attack or a stroke, 42 years of age, but you can look at his videos, they're so disgusting. Oh, I want to get that big. And he says, you want to be big? You got to eat big. Oh, okay, bro. You know what's another way to really harm your liver? Eat a whole lot of extra protein. I'm going to go run 3 miles. I went in and grabbed a 20-gram protein bar. You're killing your body. Okay? For real. I'm going to protein load because I'm lifting. Are you part of the U.S. Olympic team? No. Okay? You know, the U.S. Olympic, actually the Olympic athletes, parentheses, who don't dope, close parentheses, don't actually use any of the stupid pre-workout and all the other crap that all the fitness people and all the magazines that's extremely unhealthy. They actually have professional dietitians and nutritionists and physicians who manage their bodies, right? Yeah, they don't put that shit in. Oh yeah, this is used by the U.S. Olympic Committee. Okay, well, one of my very best friends was the head of the U.S. Olympic Committee for like almost 20 years. And I've met lots of athletes through him, and guess what? They don't. really don't, okay? So, don't care about that. Gastrin, Jim, you mentioned this like a bunch of times. Hell yeah, I did. Is it that important? You bet it is. What about secretin? Notice, gastrin is released by what? Stomach. What's secretin released by? Duodenum. Okay? What is the point of secretin? Well, what happens is the duodenum is the first tissue to get the chyme from the stomach, and it can sense the acidity, and it can sense a bunch of other content that's in the chyme. And so the minute that stuff, the chyme hits the duodenum releases secretin, and what does that do? That stimulates the release of bile. To do what? Emulsify fat. Okay? The only reason, don't worry about this, so for people who have ulcers, we do proton pump inhibitors, right? These are all cool things. The only reason why I have it here is, holy crap, histamine, right? If you're in the presence of an allergen and you have an asthmatic response to it, you get histamine release. And for, extra, so for the price of the allergen, you get acidic acid formation in the stomach. If you've got Fido or a cat or something at home that you're actually allergic to, you are constantly releasing histamine, which means you constantly have a low level or perhaps a high level of extra unwanted acid in your stomach. Okay? Cholecystokinin. Remember I said not the stomach. Okay? So where does that get released from? The duodenum. And we talked about it already. Gastric inhibitory peptides. Sweet. So listen, I'm not testing you on the individual enzymes. Other than amylase, I want you to know that amylase, pancreatic amylase and salivary amylase are the same molecule, okay? I want you to know there's 3 tiers for enzymes, right? We get progressively smaller, and that the enzymes that actually create the individual units of the dimers that we can absorb in the small intestine, those are in the brush border in the microvilli. I want you to know that, okay? The hormones that I just got talking about, I want you to know. I want you to know that lipase, the only enzyme that digests fat, is made and released by the pancreas into the small intestine. Okay? Guys, listen, we have a boatload of enzymes that do protein and carb digestion. Well, that's because those are more complicated molecules. No. Some fats are super long, right? So we only have the pancreas dedicated to releasing enzymes for fat. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't have any fat, it means we should watch the amount of fat we take in, okay? And I don't care about this slide. I already talked to you about A, B, E, and K. So listen, so a person that makes, that's a giveaway, dumb. A person whose cholesterol levels are very high. Why are they very high? There is about a 50% chance that the reason why is because the person suffers from a genetic hypercholesterolemic problem. I suffer from that. I suffer from familial hypercholesterolemia, which is incompletely dominant. So that my cholesterol levels when I'm not on a statin aren't that high at all compared to my mom's. My mom's are sky high compared to mine when she's not on a statin, and so on up the chain. Our liver makes cholesterol. Every single steroid hormone that's made in the human body starts as a cholesterol backbone that the liver makes. So does that mean we shouldn't be eating, Rich Piana, a dozen eggs a day, or a bunch of people who are very muscular? Dude, because that's the legal way to get steroid in your body. Well, you're still clogging your arteries, and you're still harming your liver, okay? But the liver makes cholesterol. We eat cholesterol. Cholesterol is in the phospholipid bilayer of almost every single cell that is in the body. So we actually need cholesterol. That's why our liver makes it, okay? So I'm not saying do or don't have cholesterol. I'm just your instructor. But you really should talk about how you're putting your body. Okay? By the way, notice emulsification. That's the mantra. Okay? Not digestion, emulsification. What do? We form micelles. Micelles, your cells, no, sorry. What are micelles? They're just like spheres, essentially, where the polar part is outside, facing the polar water molecules, and the hydrophobic parts are inside, where the fat that was broken up into smaller droplets is parked so it can be delivered. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes? Okay. FFAs, free fatty acids, don't need a carrier, don't want to have too many of those floating around. Okay? All right. Absorption, so we do almost all of our absorption of water in the small intestine. It's also where we release a ton of water, up to 2 liters, depending on how much we're eating. So you take a look, and I'm not going to ask you to know 800 versus 300, but I mean, I want you to know the small intestine absorbs at least twice as much water as the large intestine does, even though the large intestine's main job is to absorb water. And that's for late on Friday nights to take a look at. Okay. So as we age, what happens? Well, the chief cells and the parietal cells start not doing their job as much. Uh-oh. What does that mean? We're not making as much pepsinogen and releasing it. We're not making as much hydrochloric acid. So what does that mean? We're not necessarily digesting protein as effectively. Okay? So what does that mean? All I can tell you is that I know plenty of people who are in their 70s and 80s in this state who are making just, and I apologize, meat just grosses me out, okay? But they're making these ginormous steaks on grills that are those tasty little charcoal lines, those are carcinogenic, all of them. So flame broiled, yes, carcinogenic too, okay? Jim, right, you don't eat meat. Not missing out on anything, but whatever. So there are plenty of people that I know that eat tons, they're in their 70s, 80s, drink a ton, and eat a ton of meat. And you know, when you get to know people really well enough that they're willing to be open and vulnerable to you, it's like, man, damn it, Jim, after that block party, you know, I had indigestion for like 3 or 4 days. Yeah, dude, you ate like, I don't know, like 10 hamburgers, bro. Okay? And then you drank like a bottle of Jack still. Right? Yeah, our black is crazy. So we're not done. I'm joking, Jim. Oh, I'm not joking at all. Here's the deal. If I know. I will. I'm going to end at 8:45. Right? I could go over. All right. Slide 2. Dysphagia. Dysphagia. Difficulty in swallowing. So I met for coffee last week with a group of people who are in level 2 nursing. No one here is in level 2 because you haven't had PATHO, right? Yeah, they're hating life. They said, Jim, we thought your class was bad. You put so much material on us. Not even close. Just wait. That's all I'm saying. Level 2 and level 4, that's trial by fire. This is not trial by fire. Okay? So, dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing. So there's a bunch of different kinds of dysphasias. I don't know why the hell that's there. I apologize. That's embarrassing. It's possible to be powerful. Yeah. Whatever, right? So there are 3 types of dysphasias. The first type of dysphagia, type 1, we have a hard time getting whatever it is that we have in our mouth to get to the esophagus. Type 1, we can't get what we're trying to swallow to the esophagus. And so what could the causes be? neuromuscular incoordination. Well, how the hell does that happen? Well, if you've had somebody intubated in an IV for any length of time, they can have a difficult time reacclimating once they get extubated, right? That's some groups. You can have a lesion in your brain or the brainstem, problems with the medulla oblongata, etc. Okay? So the dance doesn't happen the right way. It could also be psychogenic. So what happens with these people? Either they're gagging and they're spitting the food or the fluid out, or they accidentally aspirate. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, I didn't say that somebody who aspirates has dysphagia type 1. That's not what I said. I said if somebody has dysphagia type 1, if they're not spitting the stuff out of their mouth, then they're at risk for aspiration. Okay? Type 2. What's type 1? You can't get it to the esophagus. Type 2, you got whatever the heck you're eating or drinking to the esophagus, but it didn't go all the way down. It got stuck somewhere in the esophagus. Make sense? Okay. So what causes that? Diverticula. What are those? These little openings where there aren't supposed to be openings. Okay? What's a great way to develop diverticula? Go ahead and drink or put, guzzle booze or pop even. Down, carbonated beverages. Have super spicy, super salty, very hot temperature stuff going to your esophagus. It all predisposes you to that. Okay? Achalasia, that's just, there's a million reasons why somebody could have achalasia. Achalasia is just the smooth muscle isn't doing peristalsis for whatever reasons. Okay? And then you could have strictures. Neoplasms, of course, cancer. But you could have strictures. How the hell do you get strictures? Keep drinking. Watch what happens to your esophagus long term. Just saying. Okay? So what is the symptom here? The universal feeling, oh my God, what I'm eating got stuck. Where is it stuck? I'm having a heart attack. In fact, a lot of people think they are having a heart attack. What's the one thing you don't do if you have dysphagia type 2? Well, I think I'm just going to drink some beverage or eat some bread to make it go down. That's insane. Okay? And that's why, no offense, I know our culture says so much about common sense. You have to have common sense about this, that, and the other. My feeling in common sense is if it's common, it's pretty worthless. Okay? So you don't put shit in your mouth. Ideally, what happens is peristalsis comes to a complete stop, and the brain says, I don't really like what's going on here, and it hits the reset button, and it generates some pretty strong peristaltic waves, and that gets the food ultimately go down. Does that make sense to you guys? Whatever you chase down it means it's going to stay there a lot longer. Okay? What was that? Right. Well, it's funny, Brent, and I'm not recommending you do that, but that does work for some instances. It does, actually. And then type 3. So type 1 couldn't get it to the esophagus. Type 2 couldn't get it down the esophagus. Type 3 can't get it in the stomach. Okay? It goes down, but it doesn't get into the stomach. Why? There's some obstruction at the lower esophageal sphincter, which is not a true sphincter. And these people, more than anybody else, they swallow, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, and you feel like you're having a heart attack. Okay? Don't care about that. Pyrosis, heartburn. Listen, please. I said you guys on day 1 and many times since then, I'm going to say it till the very end of the semester. It's important that you don't self-medicate heartburn and ignore it. If you have to neutralize the pain 4 times, more than 4 times in a month, you are at risk long-term for Barrett's esophagus, which is the step right before esophageal cancer. I'm here to tell you that esophageal cancer is pretty much universally fatal. And it's disastrously quick, like pancreatic cancer. Okay? So, what is it? High acid content does what? Splashes up. from the stomach and causes burn. We feel that sensation. It can, so listen, it can radiate to the neck or the throat. There are some people for whom they have exactly the symptoms of a heart attack. And they're not having a heart attack at all. They just have really out of control ulcer problem, other things causing the fibrosis. Does that make sense to you guys? So chest pain, obviously, side whatever, fine, God bless. Abdominal pain. So listen, pain is its own weird category. And pain, it's really, really, really hard to get a patient to give you a clinically satisfying description of their pain. But you can't lead them on, because then you've lost any ability to get something objective, okay? So, visceral pain, all the organs have some neuronal tissue in them. If they get inflamed or damaged, they send a signal that they're inflamed or damaged, okay? How do they get inflamed? Well, you all learned in PATHO 1 that what's the first symptom to an insult to cells? Hydrophic swelling. And then you're on your way, right? So if there's inflammation, there's stretching, that sends a pain signal back to the brain. If you have a patient that says, I don't know where it's at, where's the pain? Can you point to the pain? It's just generally in my abdomen, okay? That's probably visceral pain. Not necessarily, but probably visceral pain, okay? What does it feel like? And so there's a great Woody Allen movie where he goes to the doctor and he says, I think I'm dying of brain cancer. And the doctor says, well, do you have ringing or buzzing? And I love the line. He says, yeah, no, I do. I have a ringing and a buzzing. I have a buzzing and a ringing. It's in my right ear. No, it's in my left ear. No, come to think of it, I think it's in my right ear. You have to be super damn careful not to lead your patient on. Okay? Can you describe the pain to me? And I love it on a scale of 1 to 10. What the hell does that mean? I'm screaming right now, right? Okay. Somatic pain. Somatic pain, where does it hurt? Right there. Very localizable, okay? And it's usually incredibly sharp, so like what? Appendicitis, okay, or gallbladder infection. Referred pain, we all know about referred pain, and regretfully, most of the esophageal gastric pains run the same fiber tracts up to the brain that cardiovascular neurons do. Make sense to you guys? Okay. Acute and chronic, so listen to me. These are not the sole examples of acute and chronic. I just gave you a couple examples. The whole point with acute is you remember there's a time that I didn't have it and it just all of a sudden started. And that's different from chronic. Well, I don't know, I've had it for like a few days. Well, no, come to think of it, actually on and off for like a year or two or whatever. That's chronic, okay? Vomiting, I told you guys, is just reverse peristalsis. And obviously, there's 1,000 different things that can cause vomiting, right? Intestinal gas, I'm happy to say, I'm not lecturing, and you're not answering any test questions on intestinal gas. So, constipation. Listen, no bowel movements definitely qualifies as constipation, right? But that's not the only definition. If you're somebody like The Rock who goes very many times in a day, if The Rock is if he's eating the same amount of food, but now he's only going 5 times instead of 10 times a day, that would be constipation for him. It's relative. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. The people that tend to have constipation problems, all things being equal, are those who eat fat, don't exercise, are terrible about their water consumption, and have low fiber. Oh, and by the way, that people group that I just described, most likely to get colon cancer. Okay? Yeah, just ignore that slide. So what's diarrhea? hey, if you only go once every 2 days and you went 3 times today, that might be diarrhea for you. Clearly, explosive watery liquid stool that qualifies. What can cause diarrhea? PATHO 2 tests. Right? The HESI, NCLEX, stress. Obviously some acute infection. Now listen, oftentimes you'll get somebody who comes in and gets evaluated and they say they've been constipated. They come back to your clinic or to the emergency room 3 days later, they're like, I don't feel really well, but you know, I've had diarrhea. How much diarrhea? Well, it wasn't that much, and you're still bloated? Yeah. And you're anorexic, you don't feel like eating? Yeah. Uh-oh, that diarrhea isn't real diarrhea. They have a bowel obstruction, and some of the liquidy stuff got past, tiny little opening, and that's a medical emergency. Does that make sense to you guys? All right, we're done. I don't need minute papers, so you don't get to write your tests suck, Jim.
Yes, I really do.
Is that why you don't ask?